So I'd just like to introduce two friends of mine I have with me today, Suzanne and Christian. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. It's great to be with you.
Yeah. Christian, I kind of feel just to start just with a question for you. You've just finished writing a book that you've called Modern Day Monk. And my understanding is that it will be published very soon. Is that correct?
Well, we're in the process of finishing up the editing of it.
Right.
So yeah, we're not sure in terms of time, but I would say within the next couple of months is kind of what we're hoping for.
Right. Perhaps you could just let our listeners know, and you just chime in here with anything you feel inspired to offer to Suzanne. But I kind of feel like, because I know that a big chunk of the book was a joint venture, like 5 chapters, I understand. And just for our listeners again, that you guys have been or connected in a relationship some years ago, and basically, like, a big part of the book I know is about relationships and the healings that occurred for you. But perhaps, Christian, if you could start by just talking a little bit about what actually inspired you to write the book in the first place.
Yeah, well, I would say, just starting off, that the whole book actually is about relationship,
Right.
not necessarily romantic relationship. The last 5 chapters are kind of a he said, she said type format that goes into a relationship that, as you said earlier, Suzanne and I had. But really, the whole book is about relationship and how we have relationships with everybody and how we use them especially in this community, in a healing way.
Mm.
So I would say that the basis of the book is salvation. As a quote from the Course, it's kind of a one-line quote that the whole book is based on. It's salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from all concepts. So that was kind of the approach that made sense to me, because I always felt like if I could drop one concept, I could drop them all eventually.
Right.
I didn't know how to go about doing that, but that's what attracted me to this community. So the mind training basically does nothing more than undo concepts, and that's why we have relationship, to get in touch with the concepts that we have that are buried, that we don't know about, just simply to get in touch with them and then to release them. So we first have
Right.
to get in touch with those concepts, and then the release happens. And we
Right.
really don't have much of a say in that, and how that looks. But the first part we do, which is just the open willingness to get in touch with them, and that's basically what this community does. There's one purpose, and it's healing. One purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Did you have something else there, Christian?
No, I think
Right.
that feels complete. Yeah.
Just something that comes to mind. It really feels like a question for each of you, just to share whatever is inspiring around it. I wonder if you could just talk a bit about, because I get the feeling from both of you that there's been like profound healing that has occurred for you, during the time that that you guys have known each other. And I was wondering if you could just shed some light on if there's any specifics, anything around some of the things you've noticed, like, say, with where you're at now and how you relate to each other, or how that's been transferred to other relationships that you're in, friendships, family, any other kinds of relationships. Just what sort of washing, what sort of healing has occurred, and maybe even if there's any parables that come in that maybe that may feel helpful to just illustrate what some of the things that you may have gone through together over those years. Yeah.
Want to start?
No, you go
Um, yeah, I was just telling Nikita earlier today that I had an experience a few months ago where um, I had a lot of um, just fear and guilt come up around how I've used the relationship and that I haven't been doing it good enough. Just
Mm.
very old and deep beliefs. And and actually, I had a mystical experience at that point because there was so much guilt that I hadn't done it right.
Mm.
And I had a mystical experience where I was shown all the healing that had been done in this relationship, and it blew me away. It was just massive. And it's just, you can't, it's something that I just could never get a hold of with the senses or with my eyes. It's just something that you really can't see. But when I had that experience, I just tons of gratitude came for the amount, because I can say that's one thing that when we started the relationship, it was because we wanted to go into healing. That was the prayer of my heart. Okay. And it was very fearful too. I had a lot of fear around making that decision. I'm going to go into a relationship, not for romance, not to have fun, not for a good time, but for healing. The fun and all that came along with it, also, but that wasn't the reason that I went into it. And I would say that probably, the second part of your question is experience, maybe things
Mm.
that are more that I can see in terms of healing transfer training.
Mm.
I would say one thing is that when we started the relationship, I had a massive wall, and these concepts. They were so tightly wound. These beliefs in protectionism, protecting myself, defense, um, and it really just a deep fear of love. But whenever it came up in correction, when I felt like I was corrected, it was pretty much by anybody, but it came in very strongly with Suzanne. So was obviously something that I had to get in touch with, and she helped me get in touch with. It wasn't even in my conscious awareness. Whenever I felt corrected, I would put up this huge wall, and I could see the wall in my mind. It was monolithic, massive, huge, thick,
Giant.
giant.
Was it big?
So it would come up in terms of uh, defending myself immediately. I would just drop into it, and then attack, which was part of the defense. And I did it so fast, it surprised me, and of course shocked her. And that went on for quite a while. Just getting in touch with that. All I could do was just ask for a miracle in the middle of it. But slowly that wall has whittled away. I've gotten in touch with a lot of the concepts that were around it, and it came to a point of literally just there was this sense of this deep ontological wrong that was underneath. That's what that wall was protecting, just that deep sense of being wrong, and really have been getting more and more in touch with that, especially here over the last couple of months, it feels like. But that's what that wall was protecting, and so you might say there was no way that I could have gotten in touch with it if it hadn't been for Suzanne. Maybe I could have, but who knows how many years or lifetimes it would have taken to really start whittling those barriers down. And I would say I also used that wall with my mother, unbeknownst to me, until I got into this relationship with Suzanne. And I've seen my mother recently, and it's just not there anymore. All those defense mechanisms, just that we don't even know are there. You could just hear a tone of voice, and it drops you into a way of thinking. I call it rut thinking. We don't even know we drop into it. And so it's really, you might say, the transfer of training has taken place, in that specific way. But then I can also say in a much broader perspective, my mind is just much more peaceful. There's not that intense attack in my mind. That's always attack of myself. And that's how I came to the monastery, with just these intense attack thoughts that I covered up with anger and projection and attack and the wall. And, it's just so a lot of that has been whittled away. And I've done it the hard way, you might say. I can see people coming nowadays that don't really have to go through um, that really difficult way of getting in touch with these thoughts. And the thing, kind of the mechanism, the tool, you might say, for getting in touch with these thoughts is communication. And that's one thing that Suzanne and I, really went deep into, was just talking about all of our feelings with each other, which isn't fun to the ego. And believe you me, I wanted to run away time after time. And sometimes I did, but we always came back together, um, and really just went after it. So
That's
yeah.
beautiful, Christian. I kind of really hearing in your response there just a couple of words, things like, just the commitment that's required to really come together in the way that you have with Suzanne, and like in terms of like really going deeply, and like courage also. Like this is, what we're talking about. It's not for the faint-hearted. We're really, like what you're describing. It's like, the willingness to look deeply at aspects of the mind that we can't look at alone. We need help, and I think it's so beautiful. And I just get the feeling, as I talk with you, that your book is something that I was going to say earlier, asked this question, but it's popped back in now, of like, who's the book for? And you can talk around this in a moment, but it sort of feels like this area, this area is something that is going to be helpful to everyone, whether they feel they consider themselves to be in relationship or not. So perhaps, yeah, you could talk around that. And I'm aware, Suzanne, I haven't heard from you yet either, but like either of you, if you've got anything to say around this topic, it just feels so juicy. It's such a juicy area that, really is relevant to everyone. And it's an area that I know for myself has been, it's yeah, it just touches on a lot of deep things that have to do with real, genuinely connecting and being intimate. And so I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that when I got here, I just had a massive fear of intimacy. I was at least in touch with that. And I remember I told Lisa one time that, because she was the abbotess of the monastery at that time. And she said, well, because we're so open with each other, no private thoughts, no people pleasing. She said, this is the most intimate place on the planet. And that's the truth. It's, there's really, we don't necessarily have to be in a relationship, an intimate relationship, because we're intimate with everybody that we're surrounded by in this community. And I know I've said this over and over. I am more intimate with the men here than I ever was with any of my previous girlfriends. And
Right.
the ego mistakes, or the world mistakes, intimacy as physical intimacy, bodies
Right.
together, minds apart. So,
Right.
we're really taking a much different approach here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for the first part of your question, I would say that I don't really know who the book is for. I really wrote it because it it was a time for me to just really gather all of these things that I had been going through, the mind training, the way it's done here, and doing research on it, see how previous masters have done mind training, working with the ones that they worked with, like Ramana Maharshi, or even the Bhagavad Gita with Arjuna and Krishna, how Krishna worked with Arjuna, and there's so many similarities. It's not like the wheel has been reinvented, but it's done in a way that's very quick here, because there's no stone that's ever left unturned, and we always hear, as it's like, this is only your mind. We're always pointed back in that direction every single time. You can only see your mind. That's not to pass off responsibility, but it's really ultimately to take responsibility. So I would say this book is for people who have gone as far as they can with the course. They know they're hitting up against a wall, and they are ready for to see that there are other ways. This isn't the only way. I'll say that for sure, but I did hear David say one time, nobody's beating down the wall or beating down the door for enlightenment. And And that's been my experience. I kept wondering when people were going to start really en masse showing up, and it just hasn't
Right.
never like, because there is a massive amount of fear of love, and that's what's going on. There's
Yeah.
the getting to the love, is walking through the guilt and the fear, the blocks to the awareness of the presence of love. That's what we're doing. So we're not trying to figure out what love is. If that's beyond what can be taught, as you know, as the course says, we're actually just looking at the blocks, and the blocks are the concepts, and these relationships. That's why it's such a massive speed up, because they just push everything that we've pushed out of our awareness. They push them back up into awareness so we can take a look at them. And it ain't fun, and that's why people don't want to do it. That's why they're not beating down the door, and it's fine, and it's fine. It's perfect. It's been, I would say, it's just been, yeah, an unbelievable experience for me.
Thank you.
But I will say that what we're doing is for a lot more people than are here at this point. I will say that. Let me qualify that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's for a lot more people than are currently here.
Yeah, I think
Go,
what you're
Suzanne.
talking, what Christian is mentioning about the courage that it takes, and the fear in the mind knows that when it starts to approach this kind of undoing, that it's going to have to face this pushed out of awareness, darkness or guilt or whatever it comes out in a myriad of ways, but it's all one thing, which is a deep fear, a deep unworthiness. And so, the Course in Miracles actually is a pathway of awakening through the mirroring of relationship, and that's why it's so it can be so intense, because you live in community, and all of a sudden you see what you truly do believe, because it's projected right onto the person across the lunch table. And so then you intensify it by going into a relationship that's set up to really go deeply into the mind together, and that's where that full surrender into, I'm going to allow you into my mind, and it may not be pretty, this is a reversal of thinking. And so it's not about, the physical coming together. It's really about this very profound and deep surrender into intimacy and trust. And it's not trusting the other person, although that's certainly a component of it, but it's really trusting that the Spirit has set this up so that these things can be unearthed. And so many things. There's so many things that come up and out and are released, and it's such a beautiful, actually gentle way to do it. Of course, as you're rocking through it, and all of your concepts are getting smacked, you feel like you're in a wash machine, just like you can't. It's very disorienting, but Jesus says in the Course in Miracles that there can be extreme discomfort, and this is what people don't really want to go for. And like Christian said, this book is really sharing a way in which, if you've hit that ceiling with the Course in Miracles, and yet you still feel so resonant in your heart with it, but you're not deepening, then this is a way of showing a direction that can go deeper and deeper through really using your relationships, no matter what they are, to be completely honest. And we're not talking about absolute honesty. It's just honesty in the moment, so that you can get underneath all the lies and all the concepts that you've told yourself and all the hidden stuff, so that that radiance of who we truly are, where our true connection is, where that holy relationship is. This relationship isn't about living happily ever after with another person. It's like living happily ever after, truly, with a relationship where that your brother is one with you, and that as these concepts start to wash, you start to feel that kind of connection where there's even a deeper level of trust, because you see that it's just your own mind, and then it can get kind of fun, but before that happens, it can be a little shake, rattle, and roll,
Yeah. Just something that popped into my mind, and either of you just express or share whatever comes to you around this question. I was just hearing, like one of the tools that many of us in the communities that we live in uses a book called A Course in Miracles, and I think there's a line in there where Jesus says something like, the world is weary and without hope. And I just had this flash as you were both sharing that it feels to me as though this book is like presenting ideas that are around, being intimate, around relationships, areas that many of us probably felt and are feeling quite a lot of hopelessness, despair. And it sounds like you're actually presenting it from a point of view almost like of popping through the other side. So it's actually shedding a lot of light on this area. And I was wondering if you could just talk a bit about that, how it's like just being able to sort of extend something from being like on the other side of it, if you like. Could either of you have any thing come to mind around that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it's all for. If there was no release and no authentic healing, then it's kind of like, what's it all for? Where's the joy? And for me, with Christian, I popped so many concepts about what I thought love was. I actually thought I knew what love was, and literally had no idea. And because I had such strong concepts around that, I thought I knew it, and I thought I knew what a good relationship was. And it's almost like the Spirit saying, I want you to come unto me, and I'm going to provide you with a pathway that will show you everything that's not that. And so the dynamics that we shared together really helped me to let go of this fantasy of what love was, and to be able to to sit with somebody. Like yesterday, I was in the kitchen with Jackie, and we were doing paperwork, and there was so much love, and I woke up yesterday morning, and there's just this feeling of not needing anything. And I think if anything for me, what has been washed is this feeling of, I need somebody to show up in a certain way so that I can be happy. To me, specialness is need. It's not really that the relationships are not undertaken, or that you don't have those come in. It's just that this neediness and this, what we do is we run around and we try to get validation because we feel so insecure, because we're identified with actually we're in a mistaken identity, right? So we run around and we try to feel validated by another, and it's a desperate feeling actually, but you don't really know how desperate it is. Some are more in touch with it than others, until you start to really crack open all these ideas of what you think relationship is, or what you even think yourself to be actually, a person in a world. And so just this the what starts to happen, what I've noticed is happening, is that this love is coming from me, and all it wants to do is extend instead of get something in return.
Right.
The joy is really in the extension of that, in the giving of that, in the allowance, in the just this beautiful flow of I need do nothing. I am loved. I am love. And of course, that's coming in deeper and deeper. This has been a very incredible journey, actually, and it's ongoing. And I just feel so grateful for, just the experiences of sitting with brothers and sisters now, and not, used to be that if Christian walked in the door, it's almost like the room would disappear, and I would only, my mind would fixate. My mind would fixate on this one form figure, that why I could be in the room with 20 people, and it's like somehow he was more important, right? And that used to be valued. Like that was a good thing. It's like, oh my God, now I see it's nothing but sheer terror, It really is, this love of this world is nothing but fear wrapped up in some Hallmark card, and it is just
Mm.
It's absolutely a counterfeit. And if I have anything, when I realized back in the day when I was with my husband that we didn't have a shared purpose for awakening, and I had to leave, it's like I knew that if I ever got on the other side of special love, that I would want to shout it from the rooftops, because it's the biggest trick out there, right? So that's what I feel we're coming into now, is just to be able to extend that. And the more that I extend it, it's not for anybody else. It's for me. It's for me to just continually deepen into this experience of divine love, of this still point in the mind, where all is well,
That's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. I would just like to quickly add something. I think
Yeah.
uh, I it's like, what is on the other side? And I remember when I first found the course, there was one quote in there that I just knew if I could ever reach that, it would just be worth it. I didn't need anything else. I didn't even know what enlightenment was. I still don't. But there was one quote. A tranquil mind is no little gift. And even the word tranquil, you can just sink into that tranquility, tranquil. And I just thought, man, that's what I want. And I would say that for the most part, if you just compared my mind to the way it was when I found the course, and even to when I first got here, because I spent 5 years on the course and tried my best, but didn't do a whole lot by myself, working it by myself. From the time I've gotten here to now, it's a completely different mind. It's not the same. It's not the same mind. So that I noticed the tranquility really starting to be more of an experience than just some ephemeral idea.
That's great. Thank you. Just the topic of addictions comes to my mind, and I and you can elaborate in a moment, but I understand. I haven't seen the book. It's not out, so that's okay. But I have heard that there is a reference to addictions in the book, and perhaps either or both of you can just share around that topic and how there's been undoing for you around addictions. Yeah.
You can start.
Well, I've just, addiction, specialness is the biggest addiction, but the specialness is not about just romantic love. It's about to a self concept of being a person in a world. That's the biggest addiction. So as we undo these concepts, it's like being in the detox. I used to say that the monastery was like a spiritual detox center.
Right.
Like we literally come in and go through the DTs, because it's the when people come here, it's like there's a seriousness and a commitment to really look at the addiction to the self construct, to the self that we think we made, and to start to really shine the light of the spirit on it, so that it can start to dissolve into that light. And it's like that part of the course where he talks about when the mother takes away the scissors from the baby can scream, and because it wants the scissors, even though they may hurt. So it's like that's kind of how we are when we first start out and really intensively look at our addiction to this reality. And so I just feel like a serious commitment, and you were talking a little earlier about the courage that it takes. It takes a tremendous amount of vigilance, and Jesus talks about that in the Course of Miracles. This is not kind of a cappuccino awakening. I think I heard a teacher say one time, it's something that's it takes a lot of devotion, and of course that's what I love about everybody that literally just takes one step towards it. It's like it does take a lot of courage to put down the needle, so to speak, and really allow the mind to drop, and not even just the surface things that you're aware of, but the things that are hidden. That's probably the biggest terror. And of course, the real terror is the fear of the relief of it all and falling into the true love of who you are. So, yeah, it's well worth the journey, but it definitely takes a lot of courage and determination to hang in there with it. And knowing that you want the peace of God more than anything else is paramount, because if you still think you want things in the world, if there's still things out there that you think are valuable, then you need to probably act those out, or if you have a deep call, you can come in and go deeper into the mind and start to see, more clearly as you drop. And so I just say that it takes a ton of commitment to turn. And that's why I think Jesus says at a certain point, you don't go alone, that you do have the mighty companions by your side. And it's almost like the staff at the detox center, and we're so delusional that we don't even know that we have certain patterns, and so it's a very loving experience, but it's a very, it's up to you. It's up to you to say, I want the peace of God above all else, and then be willing to sit in that darkness sometimes over and over and over.
Thank you.
I always kind of liked addicts myself, because I said this, I think, in our last interview, because they really are seeking. There's a real sincerity. Drug addicts, heroin addicts, they're not stupid people. Actually, they're weary of the world, and they're looking for a connection. Like with everything we do in the world, is seeking for something and not finding it because it's looking in a horizontal or linear time fashion. And so this is the opportunity to just really, really look deeply at that and start to turn in a vertical way, start to turn it around and start to come off the drug.
Oh, beautiful. Was there anything coming to you around that, Christian, that you felt to share? Or?
Yeah, I was actually just thinking of the way the world deals with addiction, repression, or indulgence, and it's neither one is helpful. We were just talking about here, and we're in Utah, and there's a large religious community here, a Christian community, but it has one of the highest rates of rape or child molestation.
Child molestation, and also use of prescription drugs like
prescription
Prozac
drugs,
or tranquilizers. Yeah.
So
It's
yes, so it's just that's what happens when there's repression of these desires, especially sexual desires that we have coming through. And there has to be another choice. And for me, I know it was like the one skeleton in my closet was pornography, and so I didn't know how to make a different choice. It was either the same thing, repression, denial, and indulgence, and lots of shame that came with it. So for me, getting here was just the first step was just the willingness. I knew I had to take care of it. I didn't know how to do it. But just opening up and telling the community, which was very, very scary to me, but always just met with love. And that wasn't the end of it, but it allowed me to really see that, maybe I'm innocent, because nobody, after I've said it, is judging me. I'm just met with love. And that's another benefit of being, in a community where you're just undoing concepts. So there's a concept that the base concept is I'm guilty, and just being met over and over and over with love and innocence. And I couldn't find that in myself. I couldn't find it in myself. But my mind is so powerful, I made a community that reflected it back to me. And that actually began a very, very deep process of undoing that guilt and to a point where there's not, it's gone. So I would, that's really all I have. We do have a section in the book called Shopping and Porn, which is pretty funny because we compare shopping to porn, and yeah, so it's quite funny, and it's an eye opener, and you see that that you're not guilty, just not guilty, and that was such a huge step for me. That really, I think of the movie Mr. Nobody, where that kid has played out all these scenarios. Do I follow my father or do I follow my mother? And he played out, quantumly all of these different scenarios. And then at the very end of the movie, he's on the train track where he made that one choice, and he chooses something else. And what we're pointing toward is, choosing the miracle, choosing love, and that's actually the way out. It's not playing these scenarios out in the world. It's choice number 3, and the world does not know about choice number 3, and we actually have to train our mind. That's why it's called mind training, to choose number 3 all the time.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, just what's coming to mind is you both touched on it with some of your responses, but just a specific question around relationship and community living. How would you say, like, how important has the support from the greater community been for each of you in terms of what was being undone in you within the relationship? Yeah, could you touch on that? Thanks.
Oh, I would say it was a huge part, like a huge support.
Undoable without it.
Yeah, massive, because you want to turn and run as far. I mean, I don't know how many times we said this relationship was maximized, which is a word that we use here
when we want to run.
And then you have to learn that maximization doesn't not mean screw you, I don't want to see you again. That's not maximization.
No, there's still things to learn. we played those out as many times as we could. Yeah.
But the mighty companions and the ones that they're just given. There's certain ones that perhaps come in, and when there's such a lockup, such a lockdown, and that you're right up against a core thing, and the ego is fighting for its life and to be right and whatever. And so, yeah, it just feels really very, very, very helpful. Very helpful. Yeah, just, yeah, I can't say enough about that. Like, it seems essential.
Yeah.
And also, are you there?
Yeah, I am. I'm here.
Yeah. Also, it's like the intensity can get so high because the relationship is used for this very purpose of this purging and this allowance of the literal, darkness in the mind that's pushed out of awareness. So it's like, it's very, very comforting when that intensity is so high that you can maybe turn to another, and because it's not about Christian and it's not about Suzanne, it's about a deep unearthing of this thought system that's held us for so long, and we are literally letting it rock through and allowing it to pass through into the light. So yeah, it's very comforting to have others that support when you don't want to even look at each other.
Yeah, and I would say at the very deepest level, Suzanne and I were rocking through something, and I went and had a meeting with David, and he basically got to the core of it, and he said right off the bat, I told him what was going on, and he said, if you think this is an interpersonal relationship, you will always experience pain. And that's really what we're going for, to see that we're not having a relationship with another, because that's two bodies having a relationship. It's actually a relationship with ourselves. It's with the mind. It's working the way back to the one mind. Actually, it is not an interpersonal relationship. So, but you can't just reject something that's in the mind, like the belief in these interpersonal relationships. So it's actually using the interpersonal relationship to see that there are no interpersonal relationships, which sounds absolutely bizarre to the ego.
Yeah.
The ego has absolutely no idea what to do with that one.
Yeah.
And so, when you're using it in that way, of course the ego gets confused. Of course we get confused. Of course we get locked up. And that's why it's been so critical to have what we call thirds, somebody else coming in to kind of just gently remind us what's going on and to point out where we're hung up. So yeah, it's been critical, I would say.
That's great. Actually, another question comes to mind, which really it's around this same topic, and it has to do with like when things really come up for us, like especially when, like, say we're very new to this whole area, or this sort of path, if you like, there can be a tendency to want to go and grab anyone and everyone and talk to, and I just wondered if you could touch on the importance of discernment as the mind starts to heal, and to discern and trust who it is that you talked about this idea of actually going to someone who is able to step back and not buy into what's what you're actually talking about, and actually just hold the space. So could you just touch on that area, because it feels like it's a really crucial and helpful one in terms of the healing that's actually playing out. Yeah
That's a great point. I can just tell you my experience with it. I would say that when I got here, because I'd been so repressed, and I think it's quite common, we don't have a lot of healthy options in the world of speaking about things. So we repress typically. And so I was very repressed. I never really talked about my emotions or feelings or anything when I got here. So it was critical for me at one point, David said, vomit. That's the word he used. You have to just vomit this. Pretty much the whole monastery at that point was just
vomiting.
Yeah. So we had to, that was a critical part of just allowing this stuff to come up without judging it or trying to manipulate it in some way. It was just like, let it fly. And that was critical. But then that discernment does start coming in, and you can tell now for me, it was several months. I just had to go and go and go. But there comes a point where you can feel that and we call it expression. I was expressing I started expressing to make myself right, but I got so good at it. The ego can use anything. I got so good at it that I confused even myself. But then I noticed I didn't feel good afterwards, and it's such an intuitive community that I started getting called on it. And then I had to start taking responsibility for that. And then, for me, it was just a process. I would sometimes not express and see how I felt. Sometimes I would express, and after that initial vomiting, and it just became easier and easier for me to tell, because it's all about how do you feel, and so that's actually discernment that I think initially we have to have it pointed out by others. Okay, you need to start using discernment, and then we can start taking it on ourselves. But it was something that I actually couldn't get to by myself. And then the relationship with Suzanne came in not long after that, so that helped me get to to become more discerning, you might say, and when it was necessary to express and when it wasn't. Because I would say that the expression is almost always going to be necessary, because it's part of the communication. However, like really dropping into following our function and going for the peace and the joy actually begins undoing all of that. So yeah, it's just a process.
Yeah, like you said in the beginning, it's very essential to just, because there's so much fear in exposing.
But then after a while, it's like that's only a part of it. It's a prayer. It's like a lifting up. And you can see how even in your exposing that there's a trying to manipulate something and so on and so forth. But honestly, it becomes quite evident when you're just exposing to be right or exposing to make a point.
Yep.
Or it's an opinion. When there's an authentic healing happening in the room, you feel it. And at a certain point, it's like you see the difference between opinions and just thoughts that are random. And then you start to drop deeper and get more responsible for your mind. You start to get more and more responsible for your mind. And at this point that you're projecting. So it's like you sometimes have to sit with it. And so it evolves, it's a phase. It's not something that continues. You do start, like Christian says, you do start to get called into higher and higher function so that you're so much more focused on this miracle in your mind, the truth in your mind, that you don't have time anymore for this stuff. It's like it starts to feel dead, actually. It's like, oh, that worked before. Well, you know what? It doesn't work anymore. Now I just need to share the miracle with you. I want to see the truth in every moment. And so it's your focus. It's your whole way out. Then you can see it. It's like, okay, that was a phase. It's over. Now it's time. And that's where we're at now. We're just much more focused in the miracle, much more focused in the extending the truth and being used by the Spirit. And, this purification process, it's a phase. It's a process that you go through.
Question disappeared. Let me just. Yeah, come back. Could either of you just talk around? It's like basically one of the things I'm hearing you both describing, and it's really beautiful. It's like was there 9 chapters in A Course in Miracles that looks at special relationships, and at times Jesus actually calls them special hate, and my understanding of where he goes with that is that once we actually get below the surface of that special love, we actually need to look at what's under that, and when we actually do look at that and release it, then there's a true love. Then there's a true love, which you, as you're describing, is not interpersonal. It's a love that includes everything and everyone. I just have a question to ask you both. During some of the phases when some of that intense stuff, let's say the hatred or just these intense feelings, rage and whatever was coming up, did either of you, were there periods when it actually felt guided for you to have periods, and maybe even long periods apart? Like, has that been an aspect of your relationship? Just in terms of, let me just clarify one last piece there. Just in terms of and I'm not talking about withdrawing, I'm actually talking about something that really felt guided by the Spirit. This is like, we need to have time, and that was actually, may well have been just as healing as, you know what I mean? So yeah, could you sort of talk around that?
Yeah, I'll start real quick. And there were several times when we it was obvious that we needed to spend time apart. And then I remember one time Jason actually told us that it was the way out of whatever we were up against was to spend some time apart. So. It was a critical part of kind of walking through blocks. And what I noticed was that because it's so intense when a relationship, sometimes when a relationship is used for healing, it gets very intense sometimes. And in order for the lessons to drop in, it's critical to not spend time with the apparent other. And what I've noticed is that it just kind of sits in the background and percolates, and when it drops in and you get back together, you don't even know. But I think the one thing that I saw was that almost every time that we came back together, I would see her differently, like I was looking through different eyes. So yeah, I'm not sure I really answered your question.
Yeah, I think you did.
Yeah, absolutely. There were times when it was guided, Colin. It was, really felt like a bit of space would allow what had been um, maybe locked up or whatever to kind of actually, because it's not really about the other person, it's like the spirit has another way for it to come in. Maybe it's a little more gentle, or maybe it's just a time for some space. So I feel like you did answer the question. Yeah, we definitely had times where it was guided to be apart, for sure. And without any idea that we would come back together.
No, yeah, a lot of
Right.
times that was part
It
of it.
wasn't like we'll take 2 weeks off and see what happens. It's
Yeah.
like, it's very much in the moment. And so yeah.
Feels like you're touching on the idea of really letting go of a definition as to, okay, we are in relationship, so like we need to know this. We're going to have 3 weeks. It's like really opening the whole thing up and not defining what it is to look like. And I guess that's where we're really talking about heading into just the unknown, isn't it? It's like we don't really know what it's to look like. And I mean, that I like for the ego, that is the thing that's particularly scary, isn't it? Where often we sort of try and cling to another, thinking that somehow that's going to be helpful. But it sounds like what you're both touching on is that it's like releasing all of those ideas, and it's like freeing the other. I mean, that's what I'm hearing you both saying. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a freedom underneath all of these concepts um, that is it's a completely different experience. And then the relationships are just used for extending, or, if there's more healing, so be it. But for the most part, it really starts to flip, and either the usefulness for the relationship is over and you go your separate ways, or the spirit will use it to deepen the joy, actually, and deepen the peace of mind. So yeah, it feels like that's where it's all headed. It's for the healing. That's why we're together, and it's not about a relationship with each other. The other falls away, and in that is complete peace. There's no fear of loss. There's all that stuff. Believe me, through the course of the relationship, that all gets right up against it, and you get to see the fallacy of it, but you have to walk through the fear and the pain of it, the concept of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I'm kind of feel like what I'd just like to talk about now is just where you guys are at now. I understand, Christian, you've got a project there in Utah that you'll be working on for a little bit, but perhaps if you could both just share a little bit about what's ahead in terms of what's happening with the book. There may be people listening who would like to just find out a little bit more about when it might be available, how they can get hold of it, and also, like, are you guys available? Are there, anyone listening that might want to have you guys come over and, are you available for joinings, evening discussions in the area, that kind of thing? Could you just let us know what, if you're aware of anything of what your immediate plans are? That would be great.
Yeah.
And it's okay if you're not aware.
Yeah, it's definitely in the moment. I mean, that's what we're being driven toward more and more and more. Just like really in the moment, it's difficult to have any plans. I think one thing that it's like as soon as we have a plan and there's a grab on that plan, it's going to change, and it's just we're learning at deeper and deeper levels that there you have no control over the world you made. So I would say having said that, there's really no set time to get this book done. Really, I want to pull away from the belief that it has to be done at a certain time, because there's pain in that, and even that I even want to pull away from the belief that it needs to get done. And then it becomes about the joining around the book, and any joining that I have with Pam, the editor, or with Suzanne working on it, it's then that's what the book becomes about in that moment. Um, so I would say that there, there's no. It's a difficult question to answer.
No, you've answered
Yeah, it feels
perfectly.
like definitely the second part of the question, uh, as far as going out and extending or being called to do any sort of retreats or gatherings, we're definitely open for any invitations, and yeah, anything like that. Absolutely, we're available for that.
Yeah.
What would be the
And
best?
it really is just in the moment. Like right now, Christian has to go. He has a call with Pam, the editor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we know that that's what's happening right now. But other than that, we're really, really turn this over to the Spirit. And we just trust that everything is happening. It was never about the book itself. It was
Yeah.
about the healing underneath it. And it's been tremendous.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would be the best way if someone's just their ears pricked up? You just said that you're available. Like, what would be the best way if someone's just listening on Spreaker to this and they go, "Well, okay, how do I contact you?" Yeah, what's the thought with that?
Yeah, they can contact me on my email. It's
Yep.
Suzanne at livingmiraclescenter.org. Or my, even my cell phone is 435-630-5447. But yeah, we're just very open and willing to be used in any way that's helpful. I just feel very clear and devoted about, the depth of the journey. I should say clear and aware of the depth of the journey that we all are embarking on, and the highest amount of respect for anybody that even wants to turn around and question and start to question. Like you said in the beginning of the interview, people are weary. The world is weary now. Quote from the Course. Yeah, people, and you reference that people are weary of these relationships. They just don't work out the way that we want them to work out. And people are tired. People have had 2 and 3 marriages. It's like seek and do not find. So yeah, any kind of help with coming into a love not of this world, yeah, we're totally available for that. And Christian just he said goodbye. He had to go because he had another coming in.
Yeah.
But so grateful, Colin, for your, just your beauty and the way that you're extending through these interviews. It's, I feel like you just have such a beautiful gift, and it's a blessing to everybody.
Oh, thank you so much. I was getting goosebumps when you're talking. I just feel exactly what you're saying, your willingness just to be truly helpful. And yeah, it's a joy to be on this path with you, Suzanne. And thank you to both for your time today. So I love you.
Yeah. Love you too. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
We
Bye-bye.
will. Bye, sweetie. Bye.